Are you unsure on how to structure your gym work in season to make sure that you're feeling at your very best come match day? I've worked with hundreds of athletes and they often make this same mistake of not setting up their week correctly. So today I'm going to break down exactly how you can structure out your training, your S&C program to optimize for feeling at your very best when it matters most, which is game day. So while I could go straight into the actual tactics, the actual structure itself, I want to first explain the principles behind it, because arguably that's going to give you more benefit than the actual structure itself, because you need to understand why we do these things rather than just what they are. So firstly, we want to look at movements, not just muscle groups. So oftentimes athletes get caught in the trap of looking at bodybuilders online who are training, let's say, back and buys, chest and tries, all this sort of a split. Whereas in sport, we want to train sport-specific functional movement patterns that combine all of the dynamic patterns that we're going to be performing in our sport. So rather than thinking about what muscles I need to work in a game, you want to be looking at what problems am I going to have to solve during a match or during a sport, and how can I orientate my gym work to support them. The second one is that I want to start with the end in mind. So whenever I'm planning out my program for the month, for the year, I always have one eye on the future, one eye on the most important part of the year or the time of year where I need to be at my best. So for myself, or for a lot of the GAA athletes that I work with, it's going to be for championship, and that can be coming around August time. So we want to always have one eye on what we're doing now, but also how is that program that we're doing now contributing to us down the line whenever we're trying to be at our best. So everything that we want to do has a strategic method and a strategic progression towards peaking for the most important time of the year. And the last principle that I use is a speed-based approach, and essentially this is a training philosophy that focuses really on intent, movement quality, movement velocity, rather than just looking at load and fatigue. So everything that I do has some sort of a speed focused element to it, and that has a specific outcome of where we're looking to improve. So for me, what I'm identifying is the hips, the knees and the ankles. Obviously three key fundamental areas for improving our speed, improving our running efficiency. So what this breaks down into is looking at neutral hips, stiff knees and stiff ankles. So neutral hips is having them hips going forward rather than going backwards, where they're slipping into that anterior pelvic tilt and leaking a lot of energy. Same as well with our knees not collapsing or stiff knees. So our knees have to come down and attack the ground like a hammer. That gives us a huge amount of our force production to then propel ourselves forward. Same on our stiff ankles. So if we have let's say you imagine you're punching someone in the face. If your hand is open and it's not stiff, you're not going to be able to produce much force into that unfortunate opponent that you're facing. But if you have a closed fist, just like a stiff ankle, you're able to propel, you're able to get a large amount of force and project it into that unfortunate person. So it's really important that we're training them key areas. And again, this is kind of looking at very high level things. There's a lot of intricacies within them and that you could go on and talk a lot about. However, they're the three big areas that I like to simplify it down to leave it easy for the athletes that I work with. So they're the three key principles that I suppose apply whenever I'm programming out the week, the months, the program block. But also there's a key thing that I like to utilize, especially in season for athletes, and that is called microdosing. So as we go in season, there's an increased amount of fixtures, training sessions, which then also decreases our availability to do heavy strength training because of the fatigue, the tension that it creates and the recovery time that it requires. So in the off season you have an opportunity, you have an availability to do a lot of strength training because you have that time to recover. You're not expected to be back on the field in a day or 2 days, and you have that time to recover. So that's why oftentimes off season is the best time to build muscle, build strength. Whereas in season, by trying to fit in huge amounts of strength training in season, that will only increase our risk of injury because of the increased games and training structure of our weeks. So with that reduced amount of time that we have, what I like to do is include small units of strength and power more frequently across the week. So my sessions aren't long. They're quite short sessions. They can be anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes. And these are going to include small units of strength and power that we can include more frequently across the week, because they're not going to be as fatiguing and they won't cause as much central nervous stress on the body like a typical big strength session that you might do in the off season, where that can take you up to 48 hours to 72 hours to recover from, even sometimes. Whereas with our microdose units, they're short, they're snappy, they're looking at maybe 1 to 2 sets. The range, we want to hit all of the range of loading, so we might hit, if we're looking for a strength stimulus, we might hit 1 to 2 sets at 85% of a 1RM, which would be around the minimum effective dose to maintain that strength and maintain our overall strength capacity. Then also we might look at some lower loading, some maybe 30 to 60% to maintain our power development or our power outputs as well in season. So we're trying to vary up the loads. Sorry, this board is falling down on me here. So we're trying to vary up the loads and the motion patterns. So trying to train all of the range, or all of the planes of motion that we will be hoping to replicate or hoping to perform in a game. Again, related back to our speed-based approach, and try and replicate in them small microdose units. So I'm going to walk you through now how I pull all of this, the principles, our microdosing, into a full weekly structure. So what I've done is mapped out a full training week, and what this can look like is obviously different for a lot of athletes, but I've went with a typical game week structure, which is training Tuesday, training Friday, and a game on Sunday. This can obviously vary for you, it may vary for some athletes, but again, it's a typical structure that we see, so I went with that. So if we start at the very beginning, which is going to be, let's say, on our Monday of the week, and let's imagine that we've had a game on the Saturday prior, or the Sunday. That can be match day +1 or +2 if the game was on a Saturday, but also it's going to be -6 because we're reverse engineering from our game day, which is going to be Sunday that week. So we're always bearing in mind the game. That is everything that we're going to be orientating our training towards. All our gym work is going to be supporting our performance at the weekend. Again, this is going to be the key mistake that a lot of athletes make. They get so caught up in the gym work that they almost fall into the trap of training like a bodybuilder, training like a powerlifter, just chasing strength gains, just chasing PBs. Whereas really we need to have one eye on our performance at the weekend, and everything that we do is help and support that. So on our Monday, what I will typically do is some sort of an upper body session. This will be a lower impact session than, let's say, our off-season upper body sessions, where you're going to be chasing large volume or decent to moderate to high volumes with high intensities, where you're really looking for PBs, you're looking for strength gains, you're looking for big compound lifts that are going to tax the nervous system and tax the body to imply or to cause that growth within the body. Whereas in season, we're looking for maintenance. We're looking to just simply maintain that strength and power outputs that we have developed over the off season. Can you make strength gains in season? Of course you can. It's just going to be a lot slower, a lot more gradual than in the off season, where you can be pushing this every single week or every single session. In the in season, I would typically draw out my progressions, maybe 10 to 14 days, looking for them small gradual progressions or micro progressions like 1.25s or 2.5 kilos in that period. Whereas as I said, in the off season, you could be looking at that every single session. So in this upper body session, it's going to be low impact, as I said. So that will look like choosing dumbbells over barbells or band resisted exercises. These can be useful as they will reduce down the impact on the central nervous system, meaning that it will take less time to recover from that session. and we can get back to baseline very, very quick, while also getting that strength stimulus that we need just to maintain. So this can be anywhere from 2 to 4 sets in our upper body movements. We can put a little bit more volume in these upper body sessions because, you know, you can get away with playing or training with a little bit of muscle body or upper body soreness, whereas lower body we have to be really dialed in with that because we can't train effectively with our lower body soreness or any fatigue that's going to be lying about there. It will put us at a bigger risk of injury, so we need to be really dialed in with that, whereas upper body can be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more progressive with that. On a Monday then as well, what we can do is plug in some off-feet conditioning, typically early on in the week, because we're going to be recovering from the game at the weekend. I would choose something like an off-feet aerobic session, which could be maybe 4-minute intervals or 8-minute intervals, and really looking at that longer interval style to target the aerobic system. So again, these off-feet sessions would be short and sharp, again using that microdosing premise or that principle. So it's going to be around 15 to 20 minutes. Very easy to recover from this, but also you're going to get a bang for your buck in terms of a hit on that aerobic system to top up our fitness, to top up our conditioning levels while we're still in season. Where if you compare that with doing an upper body session plus, let's say, tempo running on the field or interval running on the field, or let's say if you're trying to do aerobic training where you're doing long, slow, steady state running of maybe 30-40 minutes, the recovery time for that session on feet will be a lot longer. The legacy that on feet loading is a lot heavier, a lot more than off feet, because there's no impact going through the joints, or very low impact going through the joints, because it's obviously off feet. So that's why I'm such a big fan of that, because you can plug in 1 to 2 of these per week, which I'll show you across the week here, pretty easily and recover very well, but also see small improvements in your fitness across the year. Whereas if you're just going off on feet loading or nothing at all, you can often see decrements to your performance, or as I said with the on-feet style conditioning, can often leave large recovery times required and put you at risk of injury. So match day +3 -5, which is going to be our Tuesday, that's going to be our first pitch day of the week. That will be where we have our first microdose session in. And again, this is where you're going to see the speed-based approach. So on my Tuesday, because our pitch session that week is going to be the furthest one away from the game, or the Tuesday session will be the furthest one away from the game, that will typically be more intensive in nature. A little bit more closed in. We'll have maybe small-sided games. We'll have more 1v1s or 2v2s in our training sessions. So what I want to do is include a speed-based approach here, and we'll look firstly at our acceleration and our change of direction here. So I forgot to write in COD, but acceleration and change of direction, and that will be included in my prep work. So I'll do a short 10 to 15 minute pre-pitch session in the gym, and a lot of that session will be focused on horizontal force production. Why I'm looking at horizontal force production is because that's what is required for acceleration. We want to produce more force going horizontally than vertically, because we're trying to push the ground away from us when we're trying to build up speed in that acceleration phase of, let's say, 0 to 30 meters. So that gym work is going to be, again, a small microdose unit where we'll look at addressing some of the key power exercises that I would typically have included in my big strength sessions in, let's say, my off season or in prior years. But now just breaking down these small microdose units across the week means that I can train more frequently, get them stimuluses that I need to maintain or improve my power outputs without getting that huge amount of fatigue that I would get from, let's say, doing 2 to 3 big gym sessions, or even 1 to 2 big gym sessions that are going to require a lot of time to recover from. So we break down our speed into our acceleration, change of direction, and our max velocity. They're going to be our kind of 3 key pillars that we look at. And on the Tuesday, I'll look at addressing the acceleration and change of direction, simply because that's going to prepare us for the demands of the training session, but also it's going to help us to improve that area of our speed when we're trying to improve that for games and for our overall performance levels. So I'll do my acceleration prep and my change of direction. That could be things like Bosch banded step ups. It could be things like we'll do a knee iso push in that, because going to be a little bit more knee dominant movements that we're going to be looking at whenever we're trying to project ourselves forward in that horizontal plane of motion in acceleration. Or ankle iso push, which again we'll be training towards that stiff ankle. We'll be trying to improve that. Isometrics such as our knee iso push, our hip iso push, our ankle iso push, these can be all really good at training the actual tendon stiffness, whereas plyometrics are good at training the muscle stiffness. So in this one, what we're trying to do with the isometrics is look at tendon stiffness, but we'll also combine them two together with isometrics and plyometrics to really get a nice balance of stiffness between the muscle and the tendon, increasing our overall rate of force development and our power outputs across the season. So that's what that session would look like. Then I would go outside, go into my speed work. Again, that would be a little bit more acceleration focused in some blocks, more so max velocity in other blocks. Just depends on the time of year that I'm working on. And again, the volume in that session will be quite low because I'm going into train afterwards. So it will be, again, just looking at the minimum effective dose, but really important that you get some dedicated speed work done, especially in season, because not a lot of teams, not a lot of, I suppose, in club settings anyway, are going to get that speed exposure that you need, which is reaching that 100% speed for 1 to 5 reps. Whereas if you leave that up to just a chance in your training sessions, you're probably not going to get it. Whereas if you get that insurance policy of just doing dedicated speed work, you'll make sure and have that box ticked, and it will be one of the best injury prevention exercises that you can do, or sessions that you can do. But also then, to improve your actual speed, we need to practice it. We need to actually do the thing to improve it. Then I'll go into my pitch session, and that will be fine. So oftentimes as well, what I meant to say is with our acceleration prep and our speed work, you go into that pitch session feeling so much better. I used to be just going straight obviously into my pitch work, maybe doing a little bit of stretching or a bit of foam rolling beforehand, and not feeling at all primed for the session. Whereas with that acceleration prep and change of direction prep, then into my speed work, I'm feeling fully fired up. My nervous system is primed for the session ahead, and I'm feeling fully energized. So it's a really good way of ticking all these boxes in terms of movements, not muscles, starting with the end in mind in terms of improving our overall speed, speed efficiency, speed mechanics, and our general speed, but also then integrating that speed-based approach where we're improving all of them areas, the neutral hips, the knees, not collapsing, the stiff ankles across the season, because we're just varying up the small exercise choices and progressing them sequentially across the year. So Wednesday then will be match day, let's say +4, -4, so 4 days off the game. I would then include my lower body strength session here. This will be, again, pretty low volume, about 1 to 2 sets, or can go up to 3 sets sometimes. Volumes will be very low. We look at getting our strength stimulus, absolutely. So we want to hit that 85% plus of our 1RM to get that neural signal, so we can maintain our strength, rather than looking at trying to maintain our strength through huge quantities and huge amounts of volume. We want to just get in, get out by hitting that strength stimulus on, let's say, our big lift of the day, whether it's a single leg or unilateral movement, let's say a Bulgarian split squat, or whether it's a bilateral movement. That can be varied up. I will typically use something like a box squat in season, because the reduced range of motion just will require or will give us less fatigue than, let's say, a full back squat. and then I will hit that for maybe 85%, or it can be a small progression on, let's say, last week or 2 weeks. I will try and progress it on very gradually across the year, and then I will just include some accessory movements, again anywhere from 1 to 3 sets across them movements, and that will just help us to maintain that strength, because we don't want to allow it to drop off, because us dropping off in terms of our strength will mean that our force production goes down, which also will then have a negative effect on our speed and our power outputs on the field, which we don't want. So it's super important that we maintain, that we keep our strength work in season, and that we don't drop off from that, because that's the last thing we want. And I know that's a big mistake a lot of athletes can make, is thinking that because they're in season they can't do any strength work. It just means that it needs to get modified, not dropped off completely. Thursday then will typically be an off day, so that could be an opportunity to get some recovery. Whether you want to do some active recovery in here, it's completely optional. Some people prefer just to take it completely off. Some people prefer to get some active recovery in here. If it's earlier in the season, so if it's, let's say, league campaign, which I'm in currently and a lot of athletes are in at the minute, what you can do here is look at another off-feet top-up session. This top-up session, compared to, let's say, our aerobic session earlier in the week, could be a little bit higher intensity interval work, where we're going to look at maybe repeated sprint intervals, or looking at some anaerobic power intervals. So shorter duration at higher intensities, but again the volume will be pretty low, because we don't want to tax the body, tax the nervous system too much here. So it could be a short 10 to 15 microdose session here, that we're just going to get in, get a small hit on whatever system we're targeting, whether we're looking at sprint intervals, which I often include because there can be a nice transfer across to our actual speed and our power outputs on the field by just doing it on the bike, minus the recovery, I suppose, legacy that an on-feet session would leave, or an on-feet speed session would leave. So I like to try and replicate that on the bike and utilize that. So there is a bit of emerging research around that, in terms of doing the sprint intervals on the bike can actually help maintain at least, or small little improvements in our speed across the season, by just doing some short duration intervals there with that. Or sometimes I'll mix it up and do some anaerobic power intervals, like 15 on, 15 off, or 30 seconds on, 30 off, which are good to just maintain that kind of level of conditioning if you feel you're not getting enough from your pitch sessions. And then Friday, our match day -2. So that is going to be where we'll do our max velocity prep. And max velocity is going to require more vertical force production than, let's say, in our acceleration, which is going to be more horizontal force production. So with that in mind, then what you want to do is orientate your exercises around that idea of vertical force production. So I'll do more upright drills, let's say our A marches or A skips, maybe some upright switches. I'll also use some isometrics there as well, mainly orientated around the hips on our Friday session, put us into that longer lever position, such as, let's say, our hip iso push, our hip iso switch, to maybe work on some more rate of force development and produce huge ground reaction forces, which are going to be even more in our max velocity. So you imagine when you're flat out sprinting, the actual force that you're putting into the ground can be upwards of 6 times your body weight, 4 to 6 times your body weight. So what we want to do is try and prepare the body and the mind for that force that's going to be going through the body. And one of the best ways that you can do that is through something like an isometric, let's say, ballistic switch, or an isometric push. You can create huge ground reaction forces, or huge forces going through them areas that were going to be required in, let's say, max velocity sprint or top end speed sprint, and replicate that in the gym without having huge amount of fatigue built up. Because again, this session will be short. It will be 10 to 15 minutes, very low volume, very short, very sharp, and just get in, get out working on them areas where we're trying to produce force vertically, and that helps us feel hugely primed going into our pitch session, which is on match day -2. Typically your match day -2 session will be a little bit more open space than your Tuesday session. So this is typically when we see managers allowing us to do maybe 15v15 big open side games, where you're going to be able to have, or where you're going to have more opportunities to open up and more opportunities to, let's say, reach that top end speed. So that's why we want to be prepared for that in our pre-pitch activation session. Whereas in your Tuesday session, you want to be prepared for that accelerations, them change of directions. So everything that we do is intentional, and it just fits in really nicely with our training schedule on the week. So we're preparing for the session, yes, the session ahead, but also we're preparing for down the road when we come to championship, that we have been, I suppose, progressing in our acceleration, change of direction, and our max velocity. We've been progressing the actual exercise complexity, the rate of force development in them exercises, or the velocity of movement that we're performing them exercises at. So it gives a really nice balanced approach there, and you're kind of killing two birds with one stone with them microdose sessions. And also you're getting in, let's say, the max V prep and the acceleration or change of direction prep. That's where you're going to be getting your main, or where I get my main power stimuluses, because they'll include a lot of, let's say, loaded jumps, plyometrics, isometrics, and then my lower body strength session on a Wednesday will only have to be my main kind of strength work. So it's going to be a lot shorter, just looking at the key fundamental movements there, and then my power work is all done in them microdose sessions. So flows really nicely. And finally, Saturday and Sunday. Okay, so Saturday is going to be match day -1. That's going to be the day before the game, and this can vary for a lot of athletes. I don't leave this as a hard and fast rule, because it varies on individual preferences, really. Some players love to get a primer session done. A primer session is essentially where you pretty much rev the engine of the central nervous system, and it can help, or it has been shown to see small benefits in terms of our power outputs, our speed outputs, our force production outputs in games, happening, let's say, 24 hours after. So this can be done anywhere from 6 to 24 or 32 hours before the game, and there has been shown to be small benefits to that. However, if going down to do a primer session causes you more stress, you have been resting up before games, you take that day before games off all your life, and you enjoy that, and you feel like it works for you, then me telling you to do a primer session is only going to do more harm than good, because you're going to be like thrown out of complete routine. You're going to feel overwhelmed, you're going to feel stressed, and then you're going to be regretting that, overthinking it going into your game. So it's important to weigh up a holistic approach to this. It's not just a hard and fast rule. I would advise, let's say, trying your primer session, seeing if you enjoy that, or if you enjoy just taking it completely off, and what helps you perform at your very best. So typically either side of the match, like or either side of match day, I leave it quite flexible to the athlete, because I think an athlete deserves that respect to have autonomy over their decision making in that period of time, because they know what works best for them. But as I say, earlier in the season, definitely trying a primer session can be useful, where you use low loads, let's say our loaded jumps or our plyometrics for 1 to 2 sets, going up towards maybe 60 to 80% of our 1RM for 1 to 2 sets, maybe 1 to 3 reps or 1 to 4 reps, and again maybe including 2 to 4 exercises. So a very short session, but again just priming the nervous system, so then you're ready to perform the day after. But again, it's going to be optional. Sometimes, or majority of the time, I take it off. I have tried primer sessions. I'm not a massive fan of them personally, but again, I know a lot of athletes who find them helpful, and I program for that to give them primer sessions. Sunday then is going to be your game day. That's when all of your work in the early week is going to come to fruition. You're going to perform at your best, and you're going to be ready to go. So hopefully that was helpful. If you did enjoy it, make sure you like, subscribe, share any comments below. If you have any questions on this, just hit me up on Instagram or drop them in the comments below. Other than that, I'll chat to you next week.